2023 meeting of the City of South Pasadena Mobility and Transportation Infrastructure Commission. With that, Leona, would you call the roll, please?
Chair Hughes, Vice Chair Hughes,
Here.
Commissioner Abelson,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
Commissioner Diego.
Here.
Chair Dunlap has an excused absence. We have Council Liaison Donovan.
Here.
Staff present, we have Ted Gerber, David Pena, our Transportation Program Manager, and myself, Leona DeWitt, the Public Works Assistant.
Thank you, Leona. We will proceed to the Pledge of Allegiance, and I ask Commissioner Zavala to lead us in the pledge tonight.
Of course, everybody please stand. Face the flag, put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now we'll move to public comment. Leona, do we have any public comment?
We do. Ben and Dana Slauson.
Good evening and welcome. If I can ask you to come to the podium and we'll turn the button on for you so we can record you and hear you. State your name, please.
Dana Nyala Solson.
And I'm Ben Nyla Solson.
We are here on behalf of the residents of Martos Drive. Our street is in incredible disrepair. It's covered in potholes, loose gravel. It poses a significant safety concern. We do have children who play on the street. I took a pretty significant fall a few weeks ago. I frequently carry my son like this. Fortunately, I was not wearing him at the time. My husband was. But I was bruised for a couple weeks. And as you could imagine, with little ones on the street, we don't want there to be potholes, loose gravel, large cracks. I completely fell, was basically taken out at my ankles, fell on the ground. So fortunately, my little one wasn't impacted, but it's, ridiculous, the state of disrepair that our street is in. I've called the city twice. I've been told 2 times that I should expect a call from an engineer. I have never once received a call back. I was given your name, Ted, to get a hold of you. I haven't yet given you a call because we were advised to come to this meeting. And given the fact that our calls have been and pleas have gone unanswered, we thought it would probably be best to come here today and address you all directly. So we are tax-paying citizens, as are the rest of our neighbors on the street, and our street really needs to be repaved.
Thank you. We appreciate those comments.
Madam Chair, may I
Yes,
ask a question?
please.
I didn't catch the name of your street.
Martos, Martos Drive. We're the first cul-de-sac up Indiana past Monterey.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate-
can you guys advise us to next steps?
We can't comment on public comment items for protocol, but we will talk to Ted about it and it will come back and we can put it on an agenda item for future discussion.
Will we be contacted in any manner?
Well, what happens is it goes on the agenda, so then that's public record.
So it won't be discussed at this meeting. We have to wait another month and then you guys will allegedly discuss it next month.
Yes, we're not at liberty to talk about any topic that hasn't been publicly agendized,
I can,
according to the Brown Act.
and I'll just say, we can follow up with staff during this meeting regarding your inquiry and just ask them if they can look into it and see if there are not only longer term improvements, which would be resurfacing, but also short-term improvements while we're waiting for the longer term. Because
Yeah, that would be great. If
empathize.
candidly, if I had been wearing my son, we'd probably be having this conversation in a courtroom, not a boardroom. So yeah, it's a safety concern.
And I'll just say, no, I understand. And the reason I first got involved in the city was because of the poor condition of my street. So I appreciate your coming here and bringing this to our attention. And staff cares, they do. And we'll follow up with them too and
Okay.
try to get something done for you.
Okay, and then you mentioned it'll be an agenda item at a future meeting. Will it be the next meeting or at some meeting in the future?
We'll work with staff on that because in the interim, they might be able to do, we'll see. I mean,
Okay,
And we can
we
ask staff.
definitely take note of the issue.
okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is that you've come to the meeting. Our Public Works Director, Ted Kerber, has heard you. His assistant, David Pena, has heard you. So I think the message is now getting to them and maybe it didn't get to them before.
Great.
We
Thank you.
appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. The next item we will touch on will be the project status update, but we'll wait a moment for Director Gerber. Ted, I think we're going to go to project update. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you. It's only been a couple short weeks since we last saw you. We have a few items to update you on. We actually have a couple pictures we wanted to show you tonight too that are associated with the project update. So some of the highlights that we want to discuss, first off the bat, our street improvements. Timely, given the public comment tonight. So we are still working on our plan to publish the bid package for what we would call the 2018-2019 street bid package. This is Monterey Road from Pasadena Avenue to the west limits of the city. This would also connect bike lanes to LA along that stretch of Monterey. It also includes Alta Vista Avenue, a small section of Forest and Sterling from, I believe, Grand to the cul-de-sac. Now we have, as you recall from our State of Streets session, we had 4 bid packages we were predicting to, or we're planning on bringing to construction this year. One was that 2018-19 resurfacing project. The other is the 1920 resurfacing project, which has other streets including Maple and Pine. We have the slurry package. And then we also have the improvements over at Arroyo, Mission, and Pasadena. Now, we've talked about the contents of the different packages, but one question that's remaining from the commission, and we haven't forgotten about this, is what is the list of streets that are in that slurry package? We're working through this based on the streets that have been identified by the commission previously, updated on several items, factors, I'll say. So for example, one street that was in that slurry package was Stony Drive. And so we've recently revisited some of these streets and we're going through them with our consultant. And as a good example, Stony Drive, we are recommending that we don't slurry that project, mostly because we're going to be building a wetland next year, right next to it, right where the street is. And so to do a slurry project right now on that street wouldn't be a good investment because we're basically going to be running construction vehicles over it. So we would delay that one a year. So we're basically looking through that entire list, and we're going to present this to you at a future meeting. My hope is next month to sort of identify which streets are on the list, which ones might have been reprioritized and why. And so you can get some a thread line from the street list that you've been reviewing over the late years and what the status of those are. So we're going through those with our consultant now. We've been actually doing site walks with them, and that's where they are. That doesn't, that's in parallel to us actually releasing the bid package, the original bid package that we developed with KOA.
And to that point, Ted, is it possible to get an updated list so that we kind of know? Because if I'm pulling
Yes.
the old lists, I want to make sure, like if we're saying taking Stony off or, and then the other thing is, I guess we need to rethink and look at, because the numbers here are obviously not going to be applicable because it was 5 years plus ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
So-
So that's part of it is the budget for those. A part of it is tied into this master planning effort we're doing. If there's a few more we want to tag in because it would be inexpensive to do so because we're already in the area. Like for example, for Stony Drive, we wouldn't do the northern end of it, but we could still do the southern end of it. And we could even do the parking lot at the baseball fields, which weren't in the original package, but it'd be easy just to do and actually upkeep with the pavement management of that facility. So there's a couple options we have, and we want to bring that back to you to review.
Yeah, because I just think it would help to have a list of, where we are, the 18, 19, 19, 20. And then if you have an idea right now of how you're breaking those into packages right now versus then also the slurry list, then we can kind of get our arms around, and then we still need to look at the list of reiterate the SB1 list.
Right.
So we have that because that's kind of moved around a bit too, so that we're real clear on what are we tackling or what are we not going to tackle, what was on our original, what might vary.
You're dead on to exactly what we're doing. So as far as the definition of the 4 packages, 3 are completely defined. There's the 1819 list, what you would call that, the 1920 list, and the Arroyo sort of segregated out Arroyo Pasadena Mission intersection. Those are in progress and not being altered. And we're moving forward to get those bid packages out and constructed this fiscal year. It's the slurry lists that we're playing with a little bit to maximize value and efficiency. So that's our hope, is to bring that list to you. Actually, we're constructing the list right now. What we submitted for SB1 for this year was actually the 1819 project list and the 1920 project list, because combined, we estimate that construction value to probably be about 3 million or a little higher. And so we need to apply additional funds to that to actually make that happen this year.
I think what will help is once we get these lists, and please, fellow commissioners, chime in, and then we look at the SU, is to almost go back to what you showed us one time where we lay it down and we see what we're covering in the city and where those projects are. So I know when the lists were originally done, it was also done to take in consideration the needs in the, in the entire city, so that the different areas were covered. So it wasn't just one area, one zone, et cetera. But I think it would help a lot. And I think for the public, it would help to get a picture of what we're envisioning, what's being tackled, and where those impacts are.
Absolutely. What you've seen before is projected map based on the previous pavement management 5-year plan. Doesn't necessarily line up exactly with, fortunately or unfortunately, the bid packages, which are defined, except for the slurry package, what this commission evaluated to be submitted and what was submitted to SB1. So we want to bring all of that information to you together and show you what the story is. So we're working on that right now.
Just 2 quick comments on this issue. Thank you, Ted. Picking up on your slurry comment. So the slurry preventative maintenance projects, I was going to make the same comment that some of those numbers are dated and some of the condition, some of those streets has deteriorated. And it's funny you mentioned Stony Drive, because there's a segment of it, as you mentioned, that's in better shape. And then there's a segment of it, maybe the northerly segment, that's a disaster.
That's part of it. Unfortunately,
yeah.
some of the streets are now downgraded into resurfacing projects. But we're trying to maximize our dollar where we can do limited dig out to do backfill and still do somewhat of a re-slurrying project with some dig outs. So that's what we're kind of targeting right now, of like, how bad is it?
Okay, so you're already evaluating that as part
Exactly.
of this.
Yeah. And we've done a few field site visits. We're going to be doing more over this coming week. And then I'm hoping that we'll have a list for our July meeting is what we're hoping.
And I appreciate your forward thinking in terms of not doing streets. And then the next month we start a big project that destroys all the work that we've done. And that's
well, exactly
happened.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yes.
And then just to confirm, bottom line, high level, the streets that we're moving forward with regard to resurfacing, those are the streets that came through the commission, came through the city council in the past years, the various lists, 18, 19, 19, 20, et cetera.
Yeah, in fact,
in
if you
some
want
way,
to
shape, or
see the
form.
18, 19, 19, 20 lists, they're in the agenda packet for tomorrow night, because they're what we're committing. It's part of our 23, 24 SB1 request.
Okay.
So because we're absolutely sure those are moving forward, the designs are in place, and it's a matter of right now, number one, KOA repackaging, editing the engineer's estimate, repackaging with the new bid documents that we received, and then releasing it. And then on the 1920, it's RKA, adding in the water and sewer improvements that we requested to do, because they overlap with some of the utility problems we've been having, water leaks and things like that. So, but the streets and their boundaries are done because the surveying work's done. You know, all of that aspect is done. We're not redoing that in any way. So those lists are committed.
Okay, and the design work for at least some of these streets has already been done, isn't that right?
Yes. yeah,
Okay,
Exactly.
okay,
For the most part, it's really about the the specification package that us companies and the engineer's estimate is being redone. It's just a few weeks of work, basically.
okay. Great, thank you, Ted.
And Ted, it'd be great if we could get maybe this all put together at least for our next meeting.
That's where our hope is, yeah, because at the same time, you know, if you're following the budget adoption process, we're working through identifying the status of all capital supporting funds, which includes SB1, you know, all the other measures that we use for street resurfacing, gas tax, those types of things. And so we're actively trying to figure all this out right now to have a projected picture for the next few years.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps. With regard to other status updates, on the slide above, what we're hoping to bring forth to our future meeting, we're hoping to also tackle this into July, is the scope of work, the planning scope of work for our Fremont Huntington project. So if you've been, as we've been talking about this over time, we have capital money for both Fremont and Huntington under two different funding sources, but it really just covers the design and construction work. We have yet to do the public outreach and conceptual design work that we need as a baseline in order to bid a design package. And so that's what we're trying to finalize right now. We have a executed master services agreement with the consultant. And we have been meeting with some of the residents on Fremont and Huntington. Out of those meetings, we've committed to knowing that this work is a bit far off because we're only in the early planning phase right now, where we still have to go through environmental design and then construction. So we're a few years out. Understanding that, we've committed to some short-term improvements or near-term improvements, I should say, for Fremont. We're looking at it for Huntington, given the commission's recommendations from our last meeting. We've gotten some cost estimates for things like restriping and trying to figure out how we're going to make that work with a maintenance contract and our budget. But a couple of slides we want to share tonight are some of the near-term improvements that will be you'll see on Fremont in July through the late summer, based on the complexity of it. Do you mind going to the first slide? Actually, Dave has been working on this a lot. I'm gonna let him talk about some of these improvements. And again, this is early on work that would come before the Fremont Huntington work. This is work that we're going to be doing the next few months. Thanks, David.
Yeah, no problem. So as Ted mentioned, we recently met with some of the Fremont families. We kind of identified some short-term measures that we can take along Fremont. So me and a couple of other staff, we did a site visit and walked the corridor to see where we can make some short-term improvements. And as shown here in some of these pictures, we highlighted some areas where some of the warning signs or were obstructed by tree branches or needed trimming of landscaping, or some of the raised reflectors or the box dots were missing, or some of the speed limit signs were either faded or conflicting. If you see on the left side, this is southbound Fremont and Buena Vista. The warning sign is obstructed by a private branch, and it's an amber warning light as cars traverse and make that curve right there. It's obstructed. There's supposed to be two, and one of them is actually non-operational. So we reached out to one of our contractors to address that. So they are looking to address that issue. Some of the other things, like I mentioned, is the speed limit conflicting. It looks like it's 35 or 25. So we're working with our operations team to rectify that. Similarly, like some of the box dots are missing or damaged. So we asked our operations teams to come up with a game plan to see how they can replace or install some of these. In addition to that, we looked at other safety improvements at Magnolia and Fremont. There's an existing crosswalks, longitudinal crosswalk. Some of the lines are actually faded, so we're looking at potentially increasing the visibility of the crosswalk at that location. If we go to the next slide.
Oops.
Some other improvements that were also that we looked at was installing some delineators at the right turn chevron markings at Fremont and Buena Vista. And also on the right side, if you look, there's actually an existing two existing crosswalks, but they're kind of conflicting. The longitudinal crosswalk markings actually lead you up into the red zone, so it doesn't lead you into the crosswalk. So there was an existing painted ladder style crosswalk at that location, but it also faded out. So we're looking at removing that thermoplastic and just repainting that that crosswalk that's existing for pedestrian visibility. And as Ted mentioned, there's some improvements that we're looking at short term and some others that we're kind of looking at a contractor to do some of these other improvements that may take a little longer, such as restriping the center line along Fremont, and as well as the double left turn pocket all along Fremont as well, because it's extremely faded in certain corridors. And some of the T parking markings along Fremont, I think between Columbia and Buena Vista, you have some on the southbound area, and as well as between the Great Crossing north of Fremont all the way to Buena Vista. I believe on the north side and the south side of Fremont, you have some faded T marking spots that we're looking at just restriping because they're extremely faded. And this is all in trying to do some short-term improvements to mitigate some speed challenges that residents have brought up, speed concerns. As well, we're also looking at the vehicle speed radar feedback signs. We've gotten a couple of quotes, so we're currently reviewing those quotes for Fremont as well as Huntington to see which one would be more feasible, and also looking at costs for implementing those measures along Fremont. So we just kind of wanted to highlight some of the stuff that we're working on, and we're coordinating with our operations team to see when they can implement some of these measures.
Thank you, David. So moving on to another update on another item. Wasn't last month, I think it was earlier this month, the first meeting in June, the council had requested that we do a brief update of our work with our neighboring cities, the city of Pasadena, the city of Alhambra, to coordinate our Measure R mobility improvement projects. You'll recall that this is a number of projects in Pasadena. They have about 240 million that they're applying to various projects. One project that the Measure R money isn't being committed to at the moment, but it's envisioned that it will support, is the revisioning of their stub area. So unlike other cities, Pasadena isn't quite ready to commit to how they're going to be reconfiguring their 710 ramp, because the request from their community was that they actually do a revisioning planning step, and they have established a special committee reporting to the city manager's office that basically is dealing with the restorative justice component of the displacement of the folks who used to live in that area. And so along with the planning of what that area is going to be looking like, they're spending some time looking at how to reconcile that issue. It's been an issue for several decades. So Pasadena is moving forward in terms of their community engagement in that respect. On the other side, recently Alhambra their city council voted to approve the submission of a funding agreement to fund several projects using their Measure R money. Alhambra's main priorities aren't necessarily the north-south traffic like they are in South Pasadena. Their largest concern is the traffic that's moving from the South 710 onto the 10 and a minority, coming from the west on the 10 that gets off of exits around Alhambra and traverses through the city because of the congestion along the I-10. That's what their consultants are advising them. And so they are primarily focusing on some reconfigurations of the I-10 itself in order to keep traffic that's heading east on the I-10. So that's their main approach. They also have some other associated plans, such as converting the 710 stub into an arterial street, and then other interchange upgrades along the I-10. So they're really early in this process, like Pasadena and like us. They're really focusing on getting their act together to get their funding agreements in place. We had talked about our large Measure R project, the SR 110 Fair Oaks interchange, where our next step is basically getting that funding agreement established with the work that we've done so far that we showed you. And so with that said, they're really in the planning phase. They have a lot more analysis to do. Then they would move into environmental design. And then their hope is that they would be, in construction in about 5 years or so. They have a lot of information on their Advancing Alhambra website. You can look at the projects and look at their presentations they've given. And we can also, we'll be also talking more about this at the commission as we get into the planning with Alhambra. We've already had a couple meetings to get an insight into what they're working on. I'll pause there if there's any questions.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment regarding coordinating with Pasadena. I think we should ask ourselves, what do we want out of that for the city of South Pasadena? And I would suggest that any project in Pasadena, you said there's questions about what the ramp configuration is going to be, but any project in Pasadena which allows traffic to go south on St. John Avenue or south on Pasadena Avenue, should it be turned to two-way, would end up at the intersection of Fremont and I'm sorry, what is it? Yeah, Columbia, thank
Columbia.
you. Fremont and Columbia, and therefore we would continue to have the problem that we have today, where there's a lot of traffic on Fremont. We're trying to figure out how to slow it down, how to calm it, with some of the improvements you showed on some of the previous slides. So I think we ought to think hard about how we want that ramp configuration to be and how it would affect us. And I would suggest that it would be in the interest of the city of South Pasadena to ensure that none of that traffic from the off-ramp is allowed to go south on Pasadena Avenue or St. John.
Thank you for that. We've expressed our perspective on that, which aligns with what you're saying. The truth is they're so early on in the process that there's really not too much happening with actual configuration options. They do have multimodal improvements that are funding has been committed to on St. John as well as Columbia, which we have a joint project on. And so they won't be doing any lane reduction as far as they're concerned at the moment. Their plans are adding things like bike lanes and other types of facilities, bike facilities and things like that, making it more of a complete street is what their objective is at the moment. But yeah, certainly that's our message with Pasadena as well.
Ted, a number of years ago, going back, one of the two things we talked about was to eliminate the California exit and drive the traffic potentially to Del Mar. The other was to have it so you couldn't go down St. John. You'd have to go over and go left to go to Fair Oaks. So you'd be going down a more thoroughfare. The same configurations at one point was talked about for Alhambra, that you wouldn't be able to go straight and get off at the terminus now, but that you would only be able to go and then turn and go into the San Bernardino headed east. And then you'd have to take there, and they were potentially going to talk about another off ramp one time. more towards the colleges. So has that come up or is that still being discussed? Those were
So
we're
really the
going
only-
back to the very end of the 710, discussions.
Sure. So in Pasadena, really the only reconfiguration discussions that have occurred were to justify the operational safety of the highway in order for Pasadena to complete the relinquishment with the California Transportation Commission. They're committed to going through this community planning effort before they consider what any of the ramp configurations could look like. So there are ramp configuration designs or drawings out there, but they were really just an initial step for the relinquishment process. They haven't committed anything in that respect.
And then in the discussions with Alhambra, I know Commissioner Sullivan mentioned a development that was going in was a concern about increased traffic on Fremont. Has
So
that been shared with us about details of anything about that construction project or development project?
So that's what we're talking about here. As Alhambra is looking at it, and again, there's more work to do, and we also have to take a look and see with regard to our planning. But in trying to solve their east-west congestion issue, they're proposing that they make modifications to the Fremont ramp to relieve the pinch point of Fremont on the I-10. They, from their consultant, there's not a perspective that they're trying to, do anything other than that. So the modifications they're talking about the Fremont ramp are really to release the congestion on the I-10. So their big thought here is that the traffic that's coming from the west already on I-10 and the traffic that's joining from the 710, they kind of go through this weave configuration on the freeway. And so they want to reconfigure the ramps so that they don't have that weave and they don't have that congestion that happens around Fremont Avenue. So they had a bunch of considerations about changes to make to Fremont because there's a school right there and how that would look. They abandoned some of their ideas and right now it's really just about not necessarily there being a higher throughput from the freeway to Fremont, just there being a higher throughput on the freeway itself. So that's their current approach. But again, they've done enough analysis so they could get their funding agreement in order. They still have a long way to go in terms of doing their modeling, their environmental review, and that type of thing, and the community engagement as well.
Madam Chair, one comment on this subject. Ted, just a reminder, at our last meeting, we were talking about Huntington Drive. And I think it was part of that conversation I mentioned that not only are Pasadena and Alhambra engaged in Measure R funded projects related to the 710, but the city of LA is as well. So, and I think we discussed at the last meeting, sort of connecting with them. I know it hasn't been very long, but connecting with them and just staying on top of their projects, just as you are with Pasadena and Alhambra, so that we're aware of everything that's going on around us.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've reached out to them, in fact, so we're working on that as well. So we took that comment.
Great, thank you.
I think the next slide is the last slide. It's just a picture of what we're talking about here, just to get your bearings. But we're talking about this Pasadena stub revision, which is that northern section. The actual ditch area is kind of filled in with red up there also. And then the St. John connection, Pasadena Avenue, Columbia, also part of their Measure R funding projects. And then on the south side, Alhambra stub, their proposed conversion of the stub to an arterial, and then the various interchange improvements, which they hope to decongest the I-10. With regard to other project updates, we have given you a description of the projects that we received funding for from the Highway Safety Improvement Program on the list. That was a request from last time. You'll notice that a lot of these are in locations where we already have other projects. So the name of the game here is the coordination of other funding to these projects. For example, Fremont and Huntington, we have, this will be the third funding source that we have focused on those streets in this intersection. So it's really just about utilizing this money to the most cost-effective way as we go through our planning for those corridors. So we've got a Monterey Road and Fremont project, Fair Oaks and Gravalia. And these are generally scoped projects. They were based on a systematic safety analysis report that the city did some years ago. So they do need some refinement in terms of what their scope is in setting up the funding agreements. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yes,
just have a
please.
question.
Sure,
Thank you.
yes.
Because I had notes for that one, so I
Yes,
appreciate
of
that.
course, yeah.
You're hitting a few of them, actually,
Of
which is
course,
great.
yes.
So these are not standalone projects. These are part of larger projects that you're working on, right?
They are standalone projects with regard to the HSIP funding.
Okay,
I guess the point is that because the projects were established some time ago in a separate safety analysis report, and that's what we have to use in order to apply for the funding. We were seeking funding, and these were the projects that were eligible based on the work that had been done in the past. So if anything, they will assist us in being able to reprioritize some of the Measure M and Measure, the Measure M MAT and the Measure R MIP money that we have for, say, like Fremont and Huntington. Does that help? But they are
Yeah,
standalone projects.
they are, okay.
Yes, yeah.
So-
We applied for 8 and we were awarded 4.
okay, which is better than
Yes.
3 or 2 or 1, right?
Yeah.
So just 2 quick questions. Is there a deadline by which this $500,000 has to be spent?
We don't have that established yet. We have to basically set up the funding agreement and, see how these would work. There is a deadline. We don't have it fixed in stone just yet.
Okay. And then the first item, and then I'll leave this one alone. The intersection of Monterey and Fremont, as well as the intersection of Fair Oaks and Gravalia, of which we're very familiar with. It says to improve traffic signal timing and hardware. But the amount's 32,000. So just wondering, I know you're still working on
Sure.
refining these, but do you have any further information there?
So that's the amount that the Caltrans will fund. We could come into the project with more money. So we could utilize, our other funding that we have there as a matching fund.
Okay,
So 32 is what we were awarded. It doesn't necessarily mean that the project cost could be like, 60, 70, 100,000, depending on the exact scope of what we're going to do. We had some project estimates that were submitted with the application. It's just that those are the project estimates are from the original safety analysis report, which is fairly old right now. So there's some work to do is what I'm saying here. It's a good news that we were awarded the money.
absolutely.
It's just a matter of how do we fit this in with our projects and how do we utilize the funding cost effectively.
Perfect. And with that, with regard to this first item, it would be helpful if we were sort of kept in the loop, so to speak, as we move forward in terms of what you're proposing. And not for all of these, but just the first one, because you're talking about traffic signal timing and hardware and such for this Monterey, Fremont, Fair Oaks, Gravalia. It'd be great if we could just be kept updated on what you're thinking for those 2.
Yeah,
as you move forward.
absolutely. I mean, the Fair Oaks Gravalia signal timing already kind of falls into the Rogan funded project we're working on now, which we will have, is when we get to that phase. Right now, we're still trying to complete the environmental with.
So that would be
Caltrans
part of that bigger.
That could be part of that
Okay.
discussion. Fremont, Monterey was a new one that is completely new for us to discuss. So it'll be a project on this list.
Yeah, because that's a new location for me, so I was not. familiar
Right.
with- Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we could just be kept updated there, that'd be.
Yeah, that's
great.
why we wanted to make sure they were on the list here. We'll split them out as we get to understand them
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Great.
And-
Thank you.
And to dovetail to that point, I would also assume where you talk about Columbia and Fremont, that would dovetail into the partnership efforts with Pasadena for Columbia.
Yeah, so there's 2 projects. There's Pasadena's Measure R funded $9.9 million project. And then there's our Measure M funded $300,000. That's what the commission committed to that. So how that's gonna actually work and what we're paying for versus what they're gonna do still has to be ironed out. But they are trying to get their funding agreement in place right now. So we could theoretically be working on that project by 2024. It just depends on, obviously Pasadena's the lead on that project. They own the majority of the street and they've got much larger funding source than we do. So that's,
But we
same
would
thing.
coordinate this 277,000 effort down to Monterey with that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. Exactly. Fremont Avenue. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
'cause
Yeah.
It's in that same quadrant and we're doing all the work. So we got to make sure it all works together.
Yes, exactly.
Any other questions regarding that topic?
Yeah, and as you notice, we've been trying to daylight all of this stuff and sort of bring it out and see how it all works together, because it's all up to now, it's kind of all been handled a bit separately under different initiatives, different reports that maybe didn't survive turnover over the years, but trying to collectively address it is what we're trying to do now. So. On our slow streets update, we have taken the commission's feedback, implementing some of the changes that we talked about along Hermosa, including the climbing lane, I'm forgetting the name for the pockets along.
Crosshatches?
No, the
Curb extensions, chicanes.
yes, the chicanes. Thank you. Yeah, so we've added that in. We've took some of the other commission recommendations. Our plan is to bring that to the July council for approval and then immediately install it. So we're already lining up the installation with the vendor so that we can just basically get it in by August, which is when we have to get it in by.
And Ted, on that with the slow street portion for the pilot for Mission, do we know exactly where the pilot parklet is going to be located? Which block?
We almost do. We're still sort of negotiating that. We don't want to advertise until we're committed with the business owner. But we're in a good place of actually figuring that out.
We'll know that soon. we hope.
Yes, yeah, we'll know it soon because we're trying to do it over the summer.
Ted, once there's a little bit more definition on Mission Street, will that be coming back to the commission before it goes to council?
Absolutely, yeah. We'll want your recommendations on the design, placement, the road diet, how we've configured the medians, left turns, parking. There's a whole lot to
Communication.
discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a full evening that night.
Thank
I think lastly, we have been working with the developer over at 625 Fair Oaks. We received an initial traffic impact analysis. We had a lot of comments to work through, mostly based on the following of our traffic impact methodology, which we talked about a couple months ago. So we don't have much on that just yet, but we're still working with that developer team. And that'll be a planning commission item per the way that the commissions are chartered. With that, I'll ask if there's any questions.
Any questions on other projects? You're good? Commissioner Fisher?
On Ramona Avenue and Oak Street, Rollin, et cetera. Do you have a timeline for the completion of the student loaning in front of the high school?
We haven't talked about that for a while. Our hope is to actually do some of that along with what we're doing on the other work with Fremont. If you recall in my previous updates, our commitment was that we, with the school, was to do a public outreach to students and parents. We had one of our staff draft up that document. It still needs some, a little bit of love, I guess I'd say, for what that, how that portrays the situation to the parents and students. So if we're able to finalize that so that we can do the improvements over the summer. That's our plan along with the other near-term improvements along Fremont that David mentioned to you.
How will we do that, given that school's out of session now?
Well, the idea is that with the documents developed, the students come back to it being in place and we educate them on what's going on as they're coming back to school.
Is the intent to do it prior to school resuming after the summer, or will it just be done whenever we're able to coordinate the materials?
Our plan is to do it before the summer is out, before students come back to school. And it's never really been the challenge never really has been about getting it done and the coordination of it and the actual work to do it. The work that David showed you in the slides is actually much more complicated than that improvement. It's really the commitment we've made to communicate with the community, the school, the parents, and the students, which is the critical path of that project. So that's our hope, is to do all of the improvements. We've got kind of like a cascading idea of how to do everything along Fremont based on the least difficult to the most difficult, which is actually restriping Fremont. Center line as part of our what we're trying to commit to in this near term. So that hopefully that answers your question, that we're trying to do this before school starts, and the critical step is that communication that we've committed to doing.
You mentioned the restriping of the double yellow line along Fremont. I agree there's a need to do that. I wasn't aware that had been programmed, though.
We're working on it. It's something that we have put on our list of what we think is going to be a helpful accomplishment. If we wait to restripe Fremont with the Fremont project, it'll be a couple of years, and we just don't think we can wait that long.
I would agree.
Commissioner Abelson, any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a few. Okay, not too many, not too many. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, these are all pretty short.
Sure.
And thank you for the report, Ted, and I'm excited to hear about some of the things that are coming down the pike, especially those. I was especially excited to hear the word immediate. That was nice to hear with regard to the slow streets.
Well,
residential line.
we've had
We
a
don't hear
staff,
it often, so
we have a staff expansion over the last couple of months. We're allowed to, we can say those things.
it's terrific.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I'm just going to go quickly through your update, just where I have a note or comment. So Measure M project funding requests. Just recall that at the last meeting, we talked about, and I know it wasn't that long ago, noting somewhere in here, the Garfield Monterey Road signal, which has been historically part of Measure M projects. I know at the moment it isn't, but making a note somewhere, I think you used the word survive turnover earlier, or the term. So I want to make sure that stays in here because it is important to this commission and the community, and the city council's approved it twice as of we. So
Yes, that was our oversight. That should have been added in here. So we'll have
Absolutely.
that in
Just
the next
friendly
report.
reminder.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
No, that's helpful.
Fremont Huntington, we talked about that earlier. So one, thrilled to hear about the short-term improvements you're looking at. And thank you for that. We talked about, or you just mentioned centerline restripe for Fremont. There are a number of streets in town that could use it, and I don't know if the centerline restripe would be a Fremont only concept, or if there are other streets that could be included in a project that we contract out. But for example, I believe it's San Pasqual, sort of where the stables are, up the hill to Arroyo Drive. The striping is it's gone completely. And the centerline restripe might be helpful there. There probably are other places, but I'm just wondering if maybe this is an opportunity to do a couple of streets where center lines have disappeared.
It could be, we're looking at this striping, and this will be, I don't know if the city's done this before, but this will be our first effort in trying to establish a ongoing striping program, much like we're trying to establish an ongoing slurry program. We don't necessarily think about it, that we have a contract in place that we, it's the cost structure is set up in such a way that we can take advantage of volume. But we are budget constrained this year. So we're trying to figure out like what is our potential volume, with Fremont sort of being our higher priority.
Sure.
To see what else we can do. Because there was some other recommendations about striping along, say, Huntington, for example. And there's striping that the city staff isn't able to accomplish, like edge line striping and things like that. So we're trying to figure out what the sweet spot of how to do that. Because as David's been researching, on a low volume scale, it's very expensive. So we're trying to figure that out.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. And I planted the seed for San Pasquale if that's something that can be included. The other concept I just wanted to plant the seed for with regard to Fremont is, and this is not the short-term measure as we've discussed, but more of your long-term conversations with the community. It'd be great to find a way to see if traffic traveling southbound on Pasadena Avenue, when it hits Columbia, if there's a way to encourage it, instead of turning left and then a quick right on Fremont and going south on Fremont, right in the area where you're planning these improvements, to continue going, traveling easterly on Columbia to Fair Oaks, and then heading down Fair Oaks through town, Huntington, and then continuing down Fremont south of Huntington. I know it's something we've discussed, but I just wanted to sort of
we had that
remind.
same conversation this morning with our
Oh.
Fremont consultant.
Okay.
So yeah, it's obviously a very complicated,
Right.
we've heard lots of solutions to that.
Oh yeah. I won't bore you with those. I'm sure you've
Yes,
heard them all,
exactly, from
but
the community. But yeah, that's
right.
that's definitely what we're trying to see. How do you do that?
Okay.
Basically, how do you do that regionally? How do you do that?
Right.
within
And
the
of course,
city?
it requires coordination with Pasadena, because some of the ideas they have for that are signal timing adjustments or things like that. But anyway, you're on it. You're aware of it. You're looking into it.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. There are a couple of moments in this list where you talk about you're working on plans that you've submitted to us and you're updating them, like for example, slow streets, which you already hit. Appreciated. And then it's either here or maybe it's elsewhere in our agenda packet. The second crossing guard concept, right, at Huntington and Marengo. And you make a comment about you've received our thoughts and you're going to be presenting to the council next month, I guess. In those instances, when you aren't coming back to us once again, which is fine, it would be terrific if, when you've sort of prepared your report that's going to city council based on recommendations from us, if there's a way that could be, whenever you issue it to whoever you issue it to share it with us as well, so that we know what you're presenting to the city council for review. Am I making sense?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We'd welcome feedback on that, because I think
and the goal is, by the way, not to give you more comments, but simply so that we're aware of what you're.
yeah, exactly. So that's a good comment. We were hopeful that we would actually have the crossing guard to council at tomorrow night's meeting. We're still trying to finalize what we're doing with it with the police department, because it's a joint report. So I'm wondering what the best way to do that is, because in some of those circumstances we're not trying to bring it back, but we also want to keep you updated as to what how staff's addressing it with the council. I'm wondering if it's as simple as just letting the commission know when we're taking it and giving you,
Yeah, we can always go to the link,
to look
go
at
to the
it,
website, but if
yeah.
we're at least
Okay.
made aware.
Sure.
Hey,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, if you could let us know if it's going to be a noted agenda item that we might have interest in.
Yeah, absolutely. We could do that. Even before that, if you have questions about items, we can, you can always ask, or if there's something really particular you want to keep tabs on, you can let us know. We can keep you in the loop.
Just a couple more. So Ramona, Commissioner Fisher already covered what I was going to ask, but I'm going to, and I think you gave us the answer that I was, so I'm going to strongly request, encourage, plea, whatever the words might come to mind to get this done before school starts. Because I
Yeah.
think, like you said, the implementation of it is not the difficult part. And it seems like you've gone through sort of the more challenging aspects of this. So it would be really nice because this was developed 2+ years ago.
Yeah.
So it would be really appreciated. In fact, it needs to be done before school comes back.
Sure.
And it sounds like that's what you're planning. Is
That's
that-
what we're planning. The step that's a little challenging is doing this outreach component the right way, the way we understand that we've been directed to do it, which is really kind of coordinating with the school and making sure that everyone's in the know. And that's not an easy thing to do. Because it's more than just basically communicating, hey, this is what we're doing. We kind of have to make a really decent attempt at trying to reach out to particular groups and put stuff in their hands to show them like, this is what we're doing. Does that
So
help?
you're saying groups beyond the school community? Is that what you're saying?
No, the school community.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
but it's not easy to reach everybody.
So having had 3 kids go through the system,
Yeah.
I'll just say that, and you're already on it. I'm probably stating the obvious, but that if you could put together some very simple notification and provide it to the school to disseminate, they have the ability to disseminate whatever you're announcing or notifying them about to the entire school community.
Yes, right.
Right.
Exactly.
So
They can also post it because they're going to have, people are going to be going to the high school website to check on the deadlines of this, that there's the checklist, there's all the form, all that stuff. And that usually could post something up there like, new for the school year, know how to park, know how to drop off, kind
Right.
of things.
We're not exactly experts in terms of like putting these types of materials together. We don't necessarily have a budget to have someone do it for us. So I'm just saying that's the difficult part. It's like putting together. We've had an attempt to put something together that doesn't exactly meet the mark. Just being transparent with you that we're trying to put something together that would meet the standard of something like this as a public works team. Whereas like in other projects, we have a communications expert or a public outreach firm that can put these types of materials together for us. We're trying to do the same thing just internally. So I'm just sharing that difficulty with you, and that's what we're trying.
Would
to
it
do.
help if we created maybe an ad hoc to help you? I'm happy to help write, draft.
Not necessarily. That kind of adds an administrative burden to manage the ad hoc for us.
Oh.
So I appreciate the offer. I think we can figure it out. We're just basically going to tap the city manager's office to help us get it done. So I'm just expressing that we've got a few things to do before we can actually get it done. I'm trying to let you know that that's where we are.
If I may mention, thank you. I think maybe one thing that you might consider doing just for school time, because the most effective, if I recall, because I went to the high school pretty recently, 5 years ago. One of the most effective forms of communication was any updates given during assemblies. So I know that there is usually some sort of opening assembly for the school year, and maybe you could possibly look into having a little small presentation or update for that assembly. It would probably only need to be brief. I don't think it needs to be a full assembly long, but I feel like that would be very effective in communicating to the students.
It's an idea, we're trying to reach the driving community before school starts. But
Right.
it's something we could also do in addition to that.
Right. And usually they can also hand out materials to the students after the assemblies. And then they could possibly take those home and then help them, their parents kind of understand what's going
Sure,
on too.
exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that comment.
Commissioner Fisher.
You know, I think communication with the community is very important. And I applaud your effort to want to make sure everyone's in the know. But you have already discussed it with the school principal. And I would argue it's their job to get it out to their students. But it would be fairly easy to develop a short 3-paragraph article for the 2 newspapers in the city and let the people find out that way. I found out by implementing many projects, even some vastly more complicated than this, that after a few days, a couple weeks, people learn what's happening. Because here we're going from a very restrictive situation to a more permissive situation. And when you paint it white, everyone, or the signs you're going to put in, everyone knows what the white curb zone means. And they'll see other people do it and they'll say, oh yeah, I guess that's permitted now. So I would argue that the timeliness of getting this in before mid-August is probably a little bit more important than making sure you've reached every possible soul that might be affected by this.
And
Thank
that's a
you for
great
the
point, Commissioner Fisher, because the other thing that newspapers can do is, whether it's Steve or whomever, which is that they can help write it for you, and you give them the facts and they'll help construct it and get it in a verbiage that's gonna, be deciphered by their readers.
And not to mention, Facebook groups also tend to pass around a lot of this information directly from newspapers as well. So
Thank you.
parents use Facebook, students generally not.
Some.
Commissioner Littleson, want to continue?
Yeah, one last topic, different topic, final topic. Huntington Drive at Marengo, second crossing guard. Just a question about a statement you have in here. So the last sentence says, so it talks about what you mentioned about Public Works and the police bringing the item to council review. It says the evaluation will begin in the summer and end after the beginning of the school year to capture the school-related traffic and pedestrian impacts. I don't understand that.
Okay, I'm glad you pointed this out. This is actually a mistake. This sentence should be on the project below.
Oh,
For the Marengo Avenue Traffic Safety Assessment. My apologies. Yeah, so.
that explains it.
Yes,
I do read these, but thank you.
thank you.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Abelson. Just a couple questions. They've captured a lot of my fury here and questions. On the Fremont Huntington, when you were talking about reaching the residents, are you thinking that's going to be before August? Because you say you want to take the agreement to council in August. I'm assuming the public outreach would be in July?
So I'm sorry for the confusion on that. The contract is actually to conduct the shred process. So we wouldn't do we're not doing public outreach before we bring it to council. The contract itself is about
okay.
the shred process. It's a multi-step, several iteration public conceptual review, sort of problem solution type of approach. And so that's what we're bringing to council to approve that scope.
Okay, thank you. And you touched on the issues about the stubs. On the sidewalk replacement ADA ramps, you're talking about the bid package. Do you know the timing of that? You said that's going to be in with your bids 1, 2, 3.
That's going to be separate.
This is going to be a separate
Yeah.
bid.
And we're trying to work with a civil firm that is advising us on some of the non-standard configuration of some of those intersections that we're having trouble designing them to be ADA compliant. And so we can't use Caltrans standard design. And so that very similarly to how some of the street packages are working, we have that design consultant helping us put together the CDBG bid package. That was sort of like the missing piece was that we've typically used Caltrans standard ADA designs, and we couldn't do that on this one.
Could I request that we include these locations when you put the list together of everything we're doing? So that becomes again, part of what we understand is going to be
Sure.
tackled.
Part of the consultant's scope is that, originally there was 12 intersections. But based on what the costs will be to reconfigure those ramps, it might not be the full 12. So once we get a better idea, we can.
But you could give us the
Yeah.
tentative 12. So
Yeah,
that we
they're
would
they're
know-
basically they're on Meridian between Monterey and Alhambra. They're basically 12 intersections along Meridian.
We talked about that. We haven't touched in a while the loop hook ramp. Next steps for that? We talked here on this about having the consultant, but I thought we've put that to bed. So do we know where we are with this particular project right now?
Oh, we don't have that yet. We basically have a line of task orders. It's a task order that have to that are going to council first. It's
Okay.
not in the top priority. It's Fremont, Huntington. It's the Marengo Safety Assessment. There's some other ones that we have that are not necessarily mobility issues. So we have it in sort of a line of contracts that, have to get vetted, reviewed, and then go to council.
I just don't want this to get forgotten. It's so important.
Yeah, if it's on the list, doesn't get forgotten, they don't all happen at once is the issue.
that's
So we're
true.
trying to, prioritize some of the ones that we talked about tonight, but we will have that before council.
And you shared that you're working on the parklet location. You talked about the Ramona. The speed study. Do we know the timing of when the speed survey study is going to be done?
We haven't initiated it yet, so we don't have a timeline per se. Another task order that has to be completed. We have the vendor and the scope and the fee. And so we have to bring that forward.
Right. And then I know you touched on it before, but again, you said no significant update. And then we had an updated status on the timing of the gold line queues. And I know that was still kind of hanging out there, but it'd be
We
nice to
we
put
don't
all
have
to
that
bed.
one.
I
We've
know a lot of
been,
it's going to relate also to what we do with Mission, but
yeah, we don't have an update on that one at the moment.
and you talk us on page 7 of the left-hand turn pocket on Huntington. I'm assuming that's going to tie in with the grant money with everything else we're doing on Huntington. Is that timing wise, is that working with everything as you see with the striping, and where is that fitting in timing wise? We look at this in Huntington's project and then Fremont's project.
Not necessarily. Our initial plan was to do that ahead of time, but it's rather expensive. And so, in consideration of that funding and the HSIP funding, we haven't figured that out just yet. We could have moved forward, but it would have been a good chunk of money to do that one little area. So again, we don't have an update on that, still in the works.
Okay, and then I was going to bring up the issue on the missing lights. I know some of those are Edison controlled, I believe. Still page 7, replacement missing Orange Grove street lamps.
We have a new staff member researching the replacement of those. They're kind of like a custom order item. And then we don't have our electrician on board yet, but the thought is that we would move them back perhaps with the electrician's assistance to rewire the foundation. But so with no update on that, that's our plan.
I was going to say to have them look at if there's state funding for LED conversion, if upgrades, depending on what's in the equipment now, that we might be able to get some money to help with that for
Sure.
energy.
Yeah,
savings.
that would actually be an HSIP, a future HSIP thing we could submit to. That's a good idea.
And And then the Marengo Avenue traffic safety, you're saying you're taking that to council, the task order in July. So that will be on there sometime on the city council agenda for July.
Yes, that's what our plan is.
Okay, I think those are all my questions. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Any other questions for Director Gerber on the project update list?
Not at the time. Thank you.
If not, then we'll go to our next item, which I believe is our 2023 to 2024 work plan
Yes.
and our annual report.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So, so for next week, as we did last year at the Commissioner Congress, we've selected some highlighted accomplishments to put on our sort of annual accomplishment slide, and then a brief selection of our expected work plan items to put on our work plan slide, essentially the items that we know are moving forward. We got some feedback from the commission during our last meeting about some of the items you'd like to see on the work plan. So tonight is our first of two steps, to finalize our annual report and our work plan. So we basically are presenting the draft to you tonight to get your thoughts on our accomplishments and our items moving forward. And the hope is that our next meeting at the beginning of the new fiscal year in July, we can finalize the annual report and finalize the 23-24 work plan. So I can just briefly touch on our accomplishments for the year. Walking through the report, we, clearly did quite a bit of work on the Slow Streets project. It basically came from, a dormant project where we had received funding in 2021. Working with this commission, we revitalized it. We created a new scope. We transitioned the project from a COVID relief project to, a new open streets concept and sidewalk dining and economic development promotion. So, and now this commission has provided their feedback on the residential street design. And so we've had quite an accomplishment this year with getting our Slow Streets program underway. We had a very productive review of our 2011 bicycle master plan. The revision of that plan is on our the council strategic plan. And so we have that on our, I believe we have that on our work plan for 2024. We did quite a bit of work this year on the Rogan funded project. If you recall, we had a very comprehensive review of the project components. We had a public forum in the commission. We also had a public outreach session at the library. We're still in the first phase of 2 phases of that project, so we haven't gotten into design yet, but we have garnered enough public input. And as we finish the environmental, we'll bring that item back to describe, how we're going to move forward with the design. We held a comprehensive state of streets joint study session with the commission and the council, where we reviewed our plan for altering how the streets are selected in the future based on various criteria. We did an evaluation of the second crossing guard at Huntington Drive and Marengo, which was a request directly from council. Earlier in the year, in the fiscal year, we had taken a look at the Meridian traffic data analysis. This was a council direction from 2021 that we picked back up and reviewed some of the intersections that council had asked us to take a look at and considered some of the commission's recommendations. We walked through a review of the development projects, 815 Fremont, Arbor Square, and 1020 El Centro. Forgot the name of that one. But we looked at that as well as walked through our transportation impact analysis methodology. We reviewed the 110 Fair Oaks Interchange improvement project, took a look at the conceptual design and walked through the process to get it to the funding agreement stage. And then most recently, we heard some comments from the community about their Huntington Drive safety concerns, and the commission provided some input, which we're trying to translate now into near-term improvements and also some long-term improvements underneath the Fremont Huntington project. So, that was our research going back through the year, going back through our staff reports, our agenda items, and writing about our accomplishments. We're more than open to take comments about perspective on those, or tweaking language. You don't have to provide that tonight. We've got some time, but that's our annual report in a nutshell.
Is that
Uh,
any questions? Commissioner Zavala, any questions on that portion of the annual report?
And just making sure, so the date for the Commissioner Congress is
28th?
Yeah,
28th.
next Wednesday, June 28th, it starts at 6 p.m. at the War Memorial.
right. Thank you very much.
Of course. And all commissions will be there. It'll be a joint council commission meeting.
Commissioner Fisher, any comments?
I had just two comments on the slow streets one. On the last paragraph, you mentioned Mission Street will include parklet improvements, street furniture, traffic calming. That's all fine. But would you have any objection to also adding traffic mitigation? The reason why I say that is we want to make sure that if the number of lanes is restricted to compared to what it is now, we don't want traffic diverting over to Magnolia Street on the north or El Centro Street on the south. So
Sure. How about we, after additional furniture, comma, traffic mitigation and other traffic calming measures?
that's fine. My second comment is on the evaluation of the second crossing guard at Huntington Marengo. And fellow commissioners, correct me if my memory isn't accurate on this, but I thought when that item was brought to us, we responded basically not to have a recommendation other than as to the process, to have the consultant come back to us with, well, how did you come to this conclusion? What is the accident rate at Huntington Marengo compared to other locations, et cetera, et cetera. And so I thought we didn't really have a recommendation other than to have the consultant come back to us. So it indicates here that Public Works worked with the consultant to incorporate the commission's recommendations and that it will go to council next. Is that accurate, or did you intend it to go back to the commission?
We didn't intend it to go back to the commission. Because of the nature of this item as a joint effort between the Public Works staff and the police staff, and then, with respect to the Transportation Commission and the Public Safety Commission, our approach was to basically collect all the information, and then as staff, consider all that and then make a recommendation as joint staff between the two departments to the council. So it wouldn't necessarily be a direct recommendation from the commission on what to do. It would be, you're basically serving as an advisement to staff in this capacity, and we've taken that advisement and then we'll make a recommendation to council.
So then when you would recommend it to the council, you would recommend that, or you would inform them that MTech did not take a position on whether there should be a second crossing guard or not?
Exactly. So what
Okay.
we'll report is that number one, MTech did make recommendations to update the report, which we did pass on to our consultant and have him make those updates to the extent that he's able to. And then number two, that there wasn't a consensus from the commission on the recommendation related to whether or not the crossing guard should, continue or not continue.
Thank you.
Any other comments? John, any more? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Abelson.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So I have a couple of comments and one relates to this same topic. So you clarified it a bit, which I appreciate. You know, my recollection from that discussion was, and what you said you were going to be reporting is fair. The one thing is missing is that the consultant's recommendation was against,
Yeah.
right?
that-
And
that'll
that's not,
be-
that's
that'll be
not
included in
here.
Yes, it'll be included in the report to council.
Okay.
That that their recommendation is against.
Okay, because when you read this, it sort of sounds like it was for. It says, received an evaluation report for a second crossing guard. And I know for is probably being used as with regard to, relating to, about, at the very first line. Nowhere in this paragraph does it say that the consultant recommended against it. And then the second thing, I think that should be mentioned somewhere. I mean, and if you're reporting it to city council, it's going to be in your report to city council. The consultant recommended against it. We asked for more information. And part of that request was because the consultant said, I don't recommend the second crossing guard, but I recommend you evaluate. And there was a whole laundry list of
I understand,
measures,
yeah.
right? And we're like, where's this coming from? And that's when we said, okay, could you
That
provide,
makes sense.
right? So if there's just some way to more accurate, not.
I have an
accurately-
idea on that. So perhaps the first line should read, the commission received an evaluation report related to a second crossing guard at Huntington Drive, and so on, instead of 4A. And then the next sentence that begins, the commission's recommendation was to quantify the data. Perhaps it's better to start that sentence with, given the consultant's recommendation to make modifications to the intersection in lieu of continuing the second crossing guard, the commission's recommendation was to justify,
Yeah.
Something like that? Okay.
Thank you. And I would suggest, there may be other reasons why this sentence is included, but the second sentence to me, the commission recognized the consistent and overall support for the second crossing guard. I don't really know what that means. I mean, there were certainly people who came and spoke in favor of it, for sure. I don't know, say that we recognize the consistent and overall support might be a bit of an overreach. Do you know
How
what I'm
about we just
saying?
clarify that to be recognized, the feedback received related to the item?
Yeah, I think that's fair. You're good at this, Dad. Thank you. And just two other things on the, I don't know which page, the page that lists the members of the commission. I guess it's page 3 of this presentation here. At the very bottom, just a correction. I don't think any of us would want this. It says the meetings are held every Tuesday. Unless I'm missing them. There's only,
Oh,
it's
yeah, it
every
should be
third Tuesday.
held the third Tuesday.
I don't know if anybody knows or will notice or care, but might as well be accurate, right? Just add third in, very small. And then the one thing that's not here that I'm thinking might be important for certain folks in the community to see, we talk about Huntington Drive safety concerns, which is the most recent community driven and politically driven topic that's come to us, but I don't see anything in here about Marengo. And putting my personal views to the side, given the community interest in Marengo and what happened at the intersection of Marengo and Maple and what staff has been doing in that regard, you might want to have some even brief discussion.
No, that's a good idea because
Yeah.
we did actually discuss the scope of that safety assessment and the commission did give us feedback. So it was something that we took on. So we can add that. That's
Okay,
a good
I think
idea.
people like to see
Yeah.
it, and you did the work, we did the work, and you did the work, so. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Abelson. I just have a few things, Ted. On page 3, I also have the every Tuesday, but also, I think we need city council with a C capitalized for city council chambers.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
On page 5, under north-south corridor, we're missing the U.S. Department of Transportation. Then we have DOT as the abbreviation.
Thank
On
you.
the second state of streets joint study session, also the 1, 2, 3, 4th line, very end, bid packages, comma, which included.
Yes.
And on the, also I thought, let's see, I thought you had in here, I wonder also if you needed to put in a mention of the slurry, because it's not in here. We have repaved, repairing, but nowhere do we also have like, include slurry projects somewhere in there too. And
Yeah, we
then-
can work that into the wording.
And then I also had, when you had Meridian Traffic Safety and Analysis somewhere there, I mentioned Morongo, but maybe you want to work that in under Huntington, because maybe we do Huntington and Marengo safety concerns.
Sure. You know, we did take it as a different night. We did take it as a separate evaluation at some point, so we could count it
We
among
could add it as a separate, or if you need to
accomplishments,
merge
yeah,
it, depending on your
might make
space
sense. I think we could do that.
requirements.
Yeah, we
Yes,
can add it.
limited. Under review of Measure R, I think maybe my suggestion is the commission continue to monitor the proposed Measure R mobility improvement projects, because we received a presentation. Those projects have been in the works a long time.
Sure. Would you prefer that we make some mention of it being in our work plan for 23-24?
That would be fine. Fellow commissioners, any thoughts on that? Okay, we can mention it's in the work plan. So those were my comments on the annual report.
Very nicely done. Thank you for putting that together. Looks good. Looks really good.
Yeah,
Excellent
it's a
job.
nice summary of activities. Refresh my memory, though. I recall last year, we were told to keep it to some short amount of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that, given all the commissions that there are and the time available. Do you know what that's?
Even
going to be?
shorter. The whole thing is like 2 minutes. So, so
So they're
instead,
basically just going to be up there very quickly, and they can have them as a handout.
yeah, in fact, for every commission, not just the Transportation Commission, the process has been that the staff is identifying the items that you'll be, that will be bulletized on that slide, and we've already done, was already done like a month ago, basically. So I can tell you what that is if you'd like, what's on the slides, but it's basically just a subset of what do you see here.
Yeah, and you're gonna have a very short amount of time.
Yes,
Yeah.
2 minutes.
And we were fortunate to have a few pictures, maps last year. We don't have that this year. It's literally bullets on everybody's slide.
Do you know when the annual report itself, is it just going automatically to city council, or is it going to be agendized, or how are they going to do that this year?
I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that they will all go together at some point, probably in maybe August or something like that.
Our next agenda item is our work plan for 2023-2024 commencing July 1. Any comments from commissioners about the proposed draft? Commissioner Zavala, you get a chance to review. Any thoughts?
Not this time. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Commissioner Fisher,
None at this time.
Commissioner Abelson.
I was just wondering if Ted had anything he wanted to say about the work plan before we.
So all I'll say is that we're taking a slightly different approach this year in terms of the format of the plan. Instead of identifying which month we'll attack each, because what we found this year is it fluctuated a little bit. We're listing all the items that we want to accomplish. And so, given staff resources and the timing of items, we're going to give you a heads up about what we're going to be talking about next. We also don't want to, given the items we might be handed or things that might come up the year, we don't want to program out, all 12 meetings. So that's why we have less than 12. So the idea is that the work plan is a little bit more flexible, but at a minimum, we want to address all these items that are here.
Okay, now I have a question.
Commissioner Abelson.
So the purpose of the work plan is to cover items or topics that we have not yet addressed or need to further or more fully address. Put differently, if there are items that we've already discussed and developed an action plan, as reflected in your update at the beginning of this packet, that's not going to be on here, right? So, because I made notes like Gold Line crossings, speed survey, Columbia Street, high school traffic, i.e. the loading zone and various things. Like those are things we've already sort of discussed and come up with a plan and you're in the process of implementing, so they won't be here. Is that a fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
reading?
I'd say that we'll continue to have the item status report that we can give you updates on those and we can have questions or comments or suggestions. These are largely all intended to be moving forward large initiatives, and each of these needs a next step with commission, either input, advisement, or we at least want to keep you in the loop about what's going on, and it will take a full meeting to go over it. Like for a good example would be the neighborhood traffic management plan. So commission's already evaluated the neighborhood traffic management plan. Is yet to be adopted by council. Right now, we are working with a software vendor to basically implement that plan, that people can use it. We want to show you that, how it works. You know, there's opportunity in the software for us to change the workflow and how people interact with it. So as community members, we may seek your opinion on, you know, does this make sense? How we've implemented what the plan was, how we've managed thresholds. And so that's like why that's on the list. So it's basically the next iteration of something that you've already reviewed, much like the other items on here. Like Measure M MSP funding would be the next round of the Measure M MSP funding, not necessarily returning to the previous round. Does that help?
No,
clarify?
it does.
Yes.
So the conclusion I'm drawing is the fact that something isn't on here doesn't mean it's not something that's being worked on. It just means it's not something that needs to come back to us for further discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these items are designed for commission discussion, advisement, or update.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you, Ted.
Ted, I just had a couple comments very much in concert with Commissioner Abelson's, because when I see Marengo safety assessment, I also thought, what about Meridian? What about Huntington? What about the Ramona? All being part of safety. So I don't know if we want to
Sure,
include,
so-
just to make sure we
Well, the
don't
reason
fall off our radar.
Yeah, the reason this is on here in particular, because in 23-24, we'll have a whole bunch of recommendations that come out of the safety assessment that were specifically scoped and will be delivered by one of our consultants for discussion. Whereas those other items, you know, you brought up Huntington, you know, besides that being a reoccurring item on our, say, project list, or something that we need to address in the Huntington Fremont Measure M, Measure R scope, like these are particular initiatives that will require specific input from the commission. Whereas like Meridian might have you know, input from a perspective of it's something that's ongoing. This will be a specific report we bring to you that we'll want your review and advisement on. If that helps like sort of differentiate something on this list versus something on the project list.
The other three, though, would be the speed survey, whether or not that, because that needs to. be
Sure,
revised.
we had planned on actually bringing that forth under the annual traffic safety update item. So in sort of making that a little bit more of a comprehensive item that doesn't just deal with the speed survey, but we anticipate to have other evaluations and inputs related to safety analysis across the city from other initiatives that we're taking on. Like, for example, we're trying to develop a Safe Streets for All implementation plan. So instead of sort of taking these items separately and having them all at different meetings, we're trying to bring them together as a annual traffic safety update. So that's sort of a sub item to that.
Okay, the last two in question would be the signal warrant for Garfield.
Sure.
That should
So-
be somewhere within, and then the last would be the street condition analysis. We were going to do a new one.
So the signal warrant from Garfield won't necessarily be its own item, because when we receive the warrant analysis, it'll either be warranted or not. Whether based on that, whether we want to seek funding for that project could be a Measure M MSP funding item. So it could be under that, but on itself, it won't necessarily need advisement on the warrant evaluation. The advisement would come of whether, you know, once we give you that information as part of our project update, whether you'd like to see that move forward as far as the Measure M funding request. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay,
somewhat.
sure.
And what about the street condition analysis? Because that was going to go forward with a whole new
Sure.
study and rating.
Yes, and that's on here too, the fifth bullet, street improvements, pavement program, master planning, and SB1 list.
Okay, so that will include, under that you're having, so this will include the 2018, 2019, 2020, plus the slurry, plus the analysis for street condition. That's what we're envisioning here. It's still going forward.
Yes, exactly. So, basically us keeping tabs on the improvement projects that we'll be doing during the fiscal year, which include those packages.
Okay.
Yes.
Those are my comments and
Of
questions.
course. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments or questions about the work report plan? Okay. Then we'll go forward. Next, we're going to move on to minutes approval from the May 31st special meeting. Any comments or changes? Commissioner Zavala?
Not this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher?
None.
Commissioner Abelson?
Just a couple.
Oh, thank you.
The minutes were terrific, very well done. I just had a few comments on page 2 of the drafts. The paragraph right before item 4. So it starts discussion among commissioners. Just so we're clear, and I know staff said they're already working on it, but right after rectangular flashing beacons, I'd like to add a comma and then the words adding edge striping, and then picking up with what's already there and the narrowing the lanes. Next, under item 4, slow streets, just change power to public works director instead of power works. He is the center of power, but for the minutes, we'll put public. Third line of that same paragraph starts suggestion. Suggestion of, and then change having to adding. So suggestion of adding a quote slow, and then add the word streets. So slow streets, unquote, sign. And then pick up with what's there. And then at the end of that sentence where it says Grand Avenue, add the words north of Mission Street, just so we know the location that we discussed. The next paragraph, I need my glasses. It says there was additional discussion that included, so I had a D there, the subjects of the design of the signs. I guess that's the slow street signs. So maybe add the word slow streets signs. And it was suggested to add a border. I didn't know what that meant, but reading it again, I guess that means border to the sign. So that's fine. No change there. And then continuing on, marking tape, use of thermoplastic, and then right after the comma, add these words, reduction of use of delineators, comma, and then pick up with time frame. Because one of the things we talked about was in some of the more in the residential areas, maybe reducing the number of delineators just to keep the aesthetic. And then at the very end of the sentence, it says curb extensions. I just want to clarify it by adding this phrase: on Hermosa Street between Floral Park Terrace and Grand Avenue, comma, use of fixed posts versus A-frames for slow street signs, comma, and then it would pick up with what's there and signage. I think the 2 more things under, it's funny, we go from slow streets, which is number 4, to work plan, which is 6. So there might be a numbering. Oh, no, we reordered, I
So we
think
got
that's why.
reordered.
Okay, so no problem there. Last paragraph of item 6. As part of the discussion, that paragraph, the end of the first sentence, where it says, it will be important to check on, and then let's propose inserting this language: diversion of traffic due to closure of, and then pick up with what's there, which is on ramps. Last change, same paragraph towards the end where we talk about Garfield and Monterey. Right before Garfield, add these words, the proposed signal at, just so it's clear what we were talking about. And that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, is there a motion to approve the amended minutes?
I move approval.
I second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Passes. Mhm. Next, we have comments. So, City Council Member Donovan, would you like to share any comments this evening?
I'll just bring you up to date on what's going on at the council. Probably just the top three items. Number one is we now have a new law firm. This first full week was last week, and that's after 7 years. So starting with somebody new, and looks like they're going to do a good job. So, and then something else I want to talk about. Okay, tomorrow's the big meeting of the year to approve the budget. I've been working on that. Council's been working on that, not me personally, for the last 3 months. They feel that they've worked out the bugs in this. Got kicked back a week or two ago, and expect we expect the budget to get approved tomorrow. Okay, you don't have a crystal ball to tell you what's going to go on, but if all goes as planned, we will have a budget for next year on schedule. And the next thing we're working on is we postponed this at the last council meeting for more time for discussion, and it was just cause for eviction. And it was on the agenda for the last council meeting, but couldn't get a consensus, so we put it off till tomorrow, only for time purposes, because we had to post it for 10 days ahead of time, which it will be. And then at the next council meeting, we'll bring up again, and hopefully we'll have a resolution to it. I said my piece at the council meetings, and now that everybody's had an extra 2 weeks to evaluate it, we'll see what happens. Okay, and just a quick summary, it seems like some owners, landlords to major apartment dwellings in the city took advantage of the expiration of the previous ordinance, both from our city and throughout the Southern California area, to issue eviction notices so I believe so that they can get the tenants out, do some minor repairs, and then significantly improve raise the monthly rents. So we'll decide what we're going to do on that, and that should be discussed tomorrow. I think that brings you up on what's hot on the council, and that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Donovan. We'll move on to Commissioner communications and comments. Commissioner Zavala, any comments tonight?
This is kind of addressing the public comment made earlier today. Am I allowed to make any comments or questions at this moment?
Not on that particular subject.
Okay. Could I possibly ask
You could do
question-
general
a
about,
general question
general.
about the process of, say, fixing the street, what like certain timeframes that people could generally expect? Is that allowed at the moment?
well, I think the issue kind of goes back to Director Gerber, this brings us back to what we touched about last meeting, and then obviously the special state of the streets where
Yeah.
you're looking at a long-range development plan and how to tackle street repairs by zones or in a methodical manner as opposed to the one-off streets that
Yeah.
people report on. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where we don't have a good plan yet in place.
I would like to frame this question more, by the way, just so like for future people who might come through who could possibly bring up similar concerns. Like maybe we can give them sort of a more straightforward answer because I feel like it would be best to avoid some vagueness, but I feel like that.
I think I
once-
can help with
Okay,
this. So
awesome.
I would just say generally, we have similar circumstances or concerns come up generally across the city, very similar to the one that was brought up tonight. So we will take a look at the street and there's a couple different things that can be done. So initially with the in-house staff that we have and with the street maintenance equipment we have, we're able to do things like filling potholes, in a limited scale, fixing cracks, things like that. And sometimes that can take care of the immediate issue that a resident might have. At the next level, there's these slurry projects, which we have had difficulty getting underway, but our plan and what the usual and routine circumstance for a city that's organized in this way would be that they have, a slurry program that they can roll out fairly easily every year that doesn't require a lot of design. It's mostly a procurement step of contracting the work. So that's kind of the next level up. And then as Vice Chair Hughes had mentioned, if the street's in very bad shape, it might require reconstruction, which is a whole design effort, and the selection of that is part of this master planning effort. So related to this item, we received the commenter's contact information. We'll look into see if there's something that can be done in the immediacy, and the same goes for other what we call sort of service requests that come into us for routine street maintenance. Beyond that, hopefully, the street as well as other streets in similar condition can be addressed through a programmatic approach.
Right. So usually it'll probably look like at least bearing with the condition for most likely like a month and a half to 2 months would probably be to get the whole process like
Bless you.
thoroughly done.
It can be much longer depending on the
Okay.
state of the street. To be fair, many of these streets have been in a poor condition for years, if not decades.
Right.
Our hope is to rectify that. But if, like I said, if there's any immediate issues, like for example, a pothole is a great example where we could, literally address hundreds of those during a year. That's something we can address very quickly, like on that order of a timeline.
Right. Thank you very much.
Of course.
That's really good clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Not at this time for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
With regard to what you were describing, Ted, are we going to receive a PCI rating for Martos versus the many other streets in the city?
Yes, our PCI survey is currently underway for all city streets.
Okay, so, the way for me, I'd like to answer it is that we will compare their street with all the other streets in the city, and we will give priority to the ones that have the lowest PCI index, and we will, create a 5-year program to see if we can get to all the streets that have that demonstrate a need for that. Also, because someone comes to the commission, I don't feel obligated that we have to agendize it. As long as the city engineer and the engineering staff hear it, in almost all cases are able to handle it. It's probably only for the bigger, larger concerns that we need to program it.
Yes, commonly our agendized item will follow the work plan that we're setting up. This one, because of the concern, we'll address it more so as a service request that at a staff level. We'll see what we can do to address the issue. The overall circumstance of street condition is already agendized with the commission based on the work plan we just discussed and this effort to improve how streets are resurfaced in the city. So, that's how we'll take this and move forward.
The only communication that I wanted was, as you will recall, this commission made a recommendation some months ago under, you're gonna have to help me, Larry, Measure R, to create on southbound Orange Grove Avenue a one through lane and one on-ramp lane to the 110 freeway. And that would mean a widening and a slight realignment of the street. And that was because of the number of ran-off roads, side swipes, fixed object collisions that occurred. And I think the data that we reviewed over a 10-year period showed that northbound Orange Grove between Columbia and the 110 freeway had like 4 collisions during that 10-year period, but southbound had like 54 collisions. And it was because of the 3 factors: the lane drop that occurs southbound, the downhill grade, and the reverse curvature in the grade. So we made that recommendation. So I noticed just a few days ago that there was another concrete street light that was knocked over.
Friendly amendment, Measure M.
Measure, thank you.
Yeah, so we do have that project on our list. The way the Measure M MSP program worked is we had to prioritize the 5 projects we submitted, some that would be earlier term and some that would be later. The earliest ones are the Gravalia Street in Fair Oaks and the pedestrian crossing. And I want to say Orange Grove I think is 3rd. But for all 4 that were approved, we're still executing the funding agreements for those. So it's not forgotten, it's just underway in terms of securing the funding that the commission voted to and the council voted to utilize that money for.
Comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Abelson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I agree with Commissioner Fisher's comments, both with regard to Orange Grove and the street repair process. Ted, you already addressed it, that you're going to follow up with regard to Martos and see what, if anything, can be done short term. My questions, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the folks coming to share it, because like I said, it's sort of what triggered my involvement in the city, for better or for worse. Question though, with regard, when folks have these questions, concerns regarding the condition of their street, what is the right method for them, or the most effective method for them to communicate that? Is there something through the website that they can submit in terms of a request, or what would be the best way? Because they mentioned a couple different efforts they had made. So I was just wondering, what's the right one, if there is one?
Sure. Through the effort we're talking about undergoing for 23-24, we're hoping there's a lot more robust information online that people can understand how the program works and understand where their street is basically in the program. Seeing as we don't have that yet, we essentially take these on as service requests. People call or they email through our website. I don't know the particular circumstances from this public comment. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of calls that are intended to reach us that don't, just because of people navigating the city phone system. So whenever we learn about that issue, we try to resolve it. And then we have a log of all the emailed requests. They go into a computer tagging system. And so we basically just try to address them one at a time. For those that happen to have their street in one of our bid packages, we'll inform them of that. For others, we'll let them know, what the condition of their street is and that, we're undertaking this effort. But, in the meantime, really, someone who's inquiring about the condition of their street or more particularly wants to notify us of a hazard that we might be able to do something about, it's really just through our service request system, which is either a phone call to one of our two phone lines or a email to our service request system.
Okay, and I'm wondering, and this may be pie in the sky, but if there were a way on our city's homepage to have some kind of a link where that a resident could click to submit a concern regarding a condition of the street. I'm guessing you probably get a few of those. It'd be great if there were a way for them to easily just go to the city website and there's a button I can click where I could say, hey, Director Gerber.
Actually they can do it, and here's our promo through the website. It's an email, but actually if you download the South Pasadena app, you can take a picture, you can
Perfect.
tag it, and then it goes into our system.
Great.
So
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
of course.
With regard to Orange Grove, I just want to say that, and it's already on our list, you're already working on it, long term, that it has to be, if it's not every week, it's every other week, that there's a reported accident on Orange Grove between Columbia and the 110 freeway, sometimes also south. But it is a regular recurring event. So it would be great if we could get something going there. And I know it's a challenge for all the reasons Commissioner Fisher mentioned, but I just want people to know we're aware of it and we're trying to do something about it. Last but not least, I was on a trip abroad a short time ago, happened to be in London, and I saw these are probably not novel devices for you all, but it was a very interesting concept. There were streets where there were bike lanes marked, I guess, class 2 marked bike lanes. And then somewhere in mid-block, there would be basically the street was cul-de-saced for cars, right? So couldn't go through. They had to turn around, but for bikes, they could. It's a very interesting. I hadn't seen it here. I'm sure it exists somewhere, but I thought it was a really novel concept and a really interesting way to encourage both to mitigate traffic and encourage the use of bikes. So I thought it was a really neat concept that we should maybe keep in mind.
Yeah, in fact, I think it was the 1020 El Centro development had put that into their design, where like vehicles that moved into the development was a separate pathway than cycling into the development. So yeah, that it's a interesting concept. And I think that, there's opportunities at a couple different places in the city to sort of fully segregate travel. Like, I guess one location is near the golf course where, you can drive a certain distance. That's also part of the bike path. And then the bike path continues and it's limited to vehicles.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's something that is seen as an active transportation benefit in terms of like development properties where they offer separate bike pathways within
Right.
the development.
And not only separating the different modes, but also on the same roadway, basically rendering the street impassable in terms of being used as a cut through, for example, if you're in a car, but if you're on a bike, you can.
Yeah,
So it's just,
that's an
it's
idea that's
interesting.
been an idea for some time for the Mission Meridian area for south of Meridian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, just sharing.
you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Abelson. Ted, just a couple things. First, many thanks to you and Dan for the annual report and the work plan. It was great. I also want to thank Dana and Ben from coming today and talk about their street condition. And I think one, you guys might recall a meeting where we had a resident come and actually put gravel down and say, this is my street. So I think we do have a lot of streets we do need to go back and analyze, and hopefully a new study will give us new information. But I also wanted to bring back the Martos question, because if there was an injury and she fell, that we can look at that from a safety concern, like the pothole situation you mentioned could be, or what we could do if there really is something that could be very dangerous. And I don't know if it's also a broken curb. I don't know where she actually fell. But if you check it out or talk to them, you might see if we can get the details so we can pinpoint the needs. And with that, I'll turn it over to you for staff comments.
Sure. So my only comment tonight, well, I guess I have two comments tonight, was to remind everyone of the Commissioner Congress next Wednesday at the War Memorial starting at 6 p.m. There is a special meeting in the council chambers before that, so there'll be some activity over here, but we'll be starting to set up around 5:30. So you're welcome to come, and they'll be given a T-shirt, and then we'll have Vice Chair Hughes will, I think, do the presentation for the commission. And the other comment we have, it was mentioned in the staff report, is that we're actively working to have the South Pasadena will be the host city for the 2023 of Royal Fest, which I mentioned previously. It'll occur on October 29th, Sunday, from 7 to 11 a.m. South Pasadena, as the host city, we're hoping to put on with SGV COG and Active SGV something similar to the Mission to Mission event by closing down Mission Street up to Orange Grove and then to the freeway. One of the early planning items we've heard about is kind of like a bike ride that starts in South Pasadena, goes down the freeway, and I think there's an opportunity basically to take the Gold Line back up to South Pasadena. But the focus right now is on the freeway closure and implementing that and the traffic control plan. We haven't really gotten into too many of the details of the open street South Pasadena event itself, but that's underway. So just want to give everybody updates on that. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Apart from transportation items, we have a leaf blower demonstration and informational event on June 27th. That'll be in Garfield Park, where you can learn more about the city's ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. As usual, we'll have vendor there and equipment that you can look at and try out, as well as an opportunity to sign up for, if you're a landscaper, sign up for some of the equipment incentives to get discounted equipment for your business.
What are the times for that event?
I
Yeah.
think it starts at 8 and it usually goes to around 12 or 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or information? If not, we can have this meeting adjourn at 8:36. Thank you all.
Well done.